floor to the individual representing the DNA DOE project, which are going to advise what their process is and the important role that they played in this identification. After that, we will be taking questions. So if you have questions, please feel free to type them in the chat, and we will do our best to address all questions that are out there. And we'll also take, excuse me, we'll also take questions from the audience. So to begin, I'd like to start with that in February of 1974, hikers were hiking in an area off of County Road 62, or which is known as Guanella Pass, near Grant, Colorado. They discovered a deceased human in that area, and they came down, reported to the sheriff's office, and the next day, on February 11th, 1974, Park County Coroner Jane Schwer, Park County Sheriff Norman Howie, and members of the Park County Sheriff's Posse responded to the area. When they found the decedent, they found him at the bottom of steep rocks in extremely treacherous terrain. The subject was partially exposed to the elements and partially frozen in snow and ice. They conducted a search of the area, looking for any personal effects that may lead to the possible identification of this individual. Unfortunately, no items were found. The boots, pants, and shirt that this individual wore were the only items recovered from the mountain. After the recovery, an autopsy was conducted by Dr. Ben Galloway, where partial fingerprints were obtained, and postmortem dental records were obtained. Unfortunately, with all this information, they ran it against all missing persons cases in the area of Colorado. They heard no results. So at that time, they called upon the media to come and write stories to see if anyone had knowledge of somebody who should be missing in this area. Unfortunately, no leads developed. By late March of 1974, this case had quickly run cold. No clues, no even hints at who this individual could be. He was interred at the Fairplay Cemetery as an unidentified, and the case remains so. We fast forward to 2011. I became coroner of Park County, and this case was a case that I had heard about from previous coroners as well as previous sheriffs and other associates with this case. The fact that he was up there with no personal effects of any kind bothered many people for a long time about who this individual could be. We decided at that time to reopen the case, and we placed the information garnered from the investigation in 1974 into NCIC, the National Criminal Database, as well as NamUs, the National Missing and Unidentified Persons Database. Unfortunately, with that information, again, no leads were developed. In 2017, I decided to re-interview former Sheriff Howie, as well as a member of the posse who had gone up that day. And with their statements, we decided to go ahead and exhume the individual. The main purpose was to collect DNA evidence. We collected a bone for DNA, and we also conducted modern x-rays to confirm the injuries from that era. We submitted the DNA sample to the FBI lab in Quantico, Virginia. They developed a profile of the individual and ran it in the KUSA database, which is running it against all criminal cases and all missing persons cases. Unfortunately, once again, no leads were developed. We looked at, as after 40 years, we thought that possibly this case just was never going to get solved. However, in 2018, I attended the American Academy of Forensic Science meetings. And during those meetings, I listened to an individual talk about an emerging science of forensic genealogy. And during the discussion, I realized that this is something that might be helpful in cases such as this. So when it came to be that all the other avenues of DNA and other avenues to identify this individual were dry, I decided to contact the DNA DOE project. I reached out to them, I asked many questions about what they do. They were able to answer a lot of questions, and I felt that this was a move that we should make to try to identify this individual. Basically a last attempt. In 2019, the DNA DOE project began working on this case. And I will let them go into describing the details of what they do, because these individuals standing to either side of me are the real experts in this, and the real experts with DNA genealogy. to you today, if you would please bring the board over, is that through all these efforts, we have been able to identify our unidentified individual after 46 years as Anthony John Armbrust III. Now, Anthony was discovered to be an aeronautical engineer and the leader of a metaphysical church in San Diego, California. What we have determined since that time is that Anthony does have surviving immediate family with a daughter and granddaughter who reside in Arizona. We have notified the family, briefed them on this case, and they have been most helpful in concluding this investigation. But what we have surmised through several interviews since the time we began to believe Anthony was our decedent is that in 1973, Anthony was newly married to his second wife, Renee. They left California at that time and came to Colorado. Through the interviews, people indicate that Anthony was suffering from a potential terminal illness, which is described to us as emphysema. They came to Golden, Colorado, where they rented an apartment. Very shortly after they rented this apartment, the members of the church in California received a letter from Anthony asking them to come to Golden, collect his personal items, and take a German Shepherd puppy that was left in the apartment. The members of the church did as they were asked. They came to Golden immediately. They found the apartment empty. They took the few remaining items and the German Shepherd puppy, who I'm happy to announce was in good health, and they returned to California. That was the last communication with Anthony. What we have determined from further interviews is that Anthony and Renee came to Colorado in what some people termed during my interviews as to be taken by God in the Colorado mountains, or what we are describing more bluntly as a suicide pact due to Anthony's failing health. So, as you may be catching on to, is that even though after 46 years we have answered a question that family has not known and that people have been wondering about, after almost 5 decades, we've been able to identify Anthony, but that has opened up a new question, mainly that of Renee, his wife. After I've conducted interviews with family and friends, as well as searched database after database, at this time it appears to us that Renee Armbrust is still missing to this day. I have conducted a preliminary search of the area where Anthony was found with no results, and I have talked with Sheriff McGraw, and we're going to be working on a few other searches to see if there's a possibility that Renee perished, as the story is told to us by friends who knew them at the time they disappeared. So at this time, I would like to go ahead and hand over the microphone to the representatives of the DNA Doe Project to really give you the details and the fantastic work that they've done. Stuff that just a few years ago we couldn't imagine as being a tool at our disposal, now is, and has led to this great and overdue identification. So with that, I'd like to turn over the podium to Missy with the DNA Doe Project.
Thank you very much, David. Good morning. My name is Missy Koski, M-I-S-S-Y-K-O-S-K-I. I'm a volunteer at the DNA Doe Project, a nonprofit corporation founded in 2017 by Dr. Margaret Gress and Dr. Colleen Fitzpatrick. We are headquartered in Sebastopol, California. The DNA Doe Project's mission is to identify John and Jane Does and return them to their families. The genealogy research that we do is pro bono, but it relies on donations to fund lab costs when agencies cannot afford them. To date, the DNA Doe Project has made over 45 confirmed identifications. I'm proud to be the team leader for this case, leading the genealogical research team for the identification of Park County John Doe after 46 years of anonymity and death. With us today from the DNA Doe Project are case manager Joan and 2 team members, Lori Flowers and Jackie Jones. Not all of our members were able to make it today, but I would like to acknowledge their hard work on this case also. Coroner David Kins Jr. of the Park County Coroner's Office initially contacted the DNA Doe Project during the summer of 2019. This is how we became involved, and we are grateful for the opportunity. December 2019, the Park County Coroner's Office shipped samples to Astria Forensics in Santa Cruz, California. 2 sequencing libraries were then sent to Hudson Alpha Discovery in Huntsville, Alabama for whole genome sequencing. The DNA sequencing results were then sent to bioinformatics in March, and a kit was developed by Kevin Lord of Sabre Investigations of Belton, Texas. The kit was uploaded to GEDmatch March 20th of this year, and in addition, we asked for permission to upload to Family Tree DNA. GEDmatch is a free database where people who have had their DNA tested at commercial companies such as 23andMe and Ancestry.com can upload their DNA results and compare them to each other. GEDmatch is open for use to anyone who wants to upload their DNA profile. Due to privacy concerns, about a year ago, GEDmatch recently changed their policy for law enforcement type uses, and now with informed consent, you must opt in order for law enforcement to possibly see you as a DNA match. When this change took place, we lost a huge amount of possible matches for our Doe cases. So it is our mission to get the word out that if you want to help us identify John and Jane Does, please get your DNA tested and upload to companies like GEDmatch and FTDNA. And remember to opt in for law enforcement viewing. Both of these sites are free. So once the kit was uploaded to GEDmatch, we assembled the team and the research began. We soon realized that the majority of our John Doe's matches were of German and Hungarian Jewish descent. The challenging part of building these family trees is that many of these matches and their families had to change their names during the early 1900s to avoid persecution. When we realized we needed a little bit of help, we added someone. We added Susan King, who is an expert in Jewish genealogy. And she came on to the DNA Doe Project to assist with our research. We also learned in researching Jewish genealogy that many of the records in Eastern Europe were destroyed. Sometimes all you have to go on when you're researching Jewish genealogy is the towns that these people lived in. So it's very difficult. Many times the families are separated. Some survived the Holocaust, but many did not. And we just want to pay homage to that. Another challenge that we faced while trying to solve this case was that a key match was adopted. It took proving the biological ancestors of that match to eventually be able to identify a common ancestor couple. And that's where our work really started to come in once we identified this couple right here. And so what we ended up having to do, was find all of that couple's children, grandchildren, great-grandchildren, and it took some time and it took work because these are people that are born in the 1850s, 1860s, and sometimes it's not easy to find those records. But we worked and worked, and we found. After building down to a great-grandchild, we found who we believed to be our candidate. In order to prove this candidate was, in fact, John Doe, we needed to prove a DNA match from the father's side, because what we had so far here was just on the mother's side. So we did a little more research, and the team found a cousin who was willing to test DNA. So after that cousin took the test and the results were uploaded to GEDmatch, our results confirmed exactly what we expected. That cousin matched at the level of a first cousin, which is exactly what we needed. I'd like to now turn over to Lori Flowers, who would like to thank everyone that has helped us in this research.
Hi, I'm Lori Flowers, Loriflowers. The DNA Doe Project wishes to acknowledge the contributions of those groups and individuals who helped solve this case. The family members who were more than willing to help us by having their DNA tested. Park County Coroner David E. Kintz Jr. for entrusting this case to us. Astria Forensics for extraction. Hudson Alpha Discovery for sequencing. Kevin Lord of Sabre Investigations for bioinformatics. GEDmatch and Family Tree DNA for providing their databases. And DDP's dedicated team of volunteer genealogists who provided the Park County Coroner's Office with an identification. We also want to thank our generous donors who contributed a portion of the funding for the testing to help us solve this case. We thank you for your attendance today, and by spreading the word about the DNA Doe Project, we hope to be able to continue to identify the many John and Jane Does who remain unidentified. Thank you.
Thank you, Lori. Thank you, Missy. So we do have a couple of questions that have surfaced. I do want to say there was one error. I apologize. We are human. On the board in front of you, the name is misspelled. The last name of Anthony is Armbrust. So I apologize for that typo, but just so you're aware in the media that Armbrust. We have seen one question about any leads on Renee. And what I can tell you through my interviews, that it is pretty much concluded between family and friends that Renee came here very willingly for this pact, and absolutely would not have left Anthony's side, is what we've heard over and over from different sources and different sides. So right now, our first lead is the very serious possibility that she was not found in the same area in 1974 due to the treacherous conditions. That's why we're going to focus efforts initially. I've talked with Sheriff McGraw, and we're going to do some more searching in that area. It is treacherous country, and it's been almost 5 decades. So we do not know what the chances of success are, but that is our major lead. We have no other leads at this time. She goes completely off record as of 1973. We cannot find her in any database anywhere after that time. So at this point, that is our biggest lead, is pursuing where she might be, and trying to look to see if she perished in the same place. Okay. So do we have any other questions? Have any other questions come in on Facebook Live or here in person? Do we have any questions that we can answer? Ellie?
What did people close to Anthony, how did they refer to him? Was it Anthony, or was it John, or was it Tony? How do you think people close to him addressed him?
The question that we have from the media here is that how did friends refer to Anthony? I refer to him as Anthony as the legal name, but most people tell us that they refer to him as John, and that's what he went by for his name. He, as being the leader of this metaphysical church, which they describe him as a guru, is how I heard him described multiple ways. And so that's what we know from numerous people who knew of John at that time. Do we have any other questions coming in through Facebook Live or from here in person that we can address?
So I know the dates have been given, but maybe it's escaped me. From the time you contacted these experts and to the time you got Anthony's name for the first time, how long was that? How long did you ladies work on the case, as specifically as you can?
The first time that I reached out to the DNA Doe Project was, I believe, the first conversation was in the spring of 2019.
Okay.
We had to build the process process because we also had to obtain the bone powder sample for their lab to use, which was still in possession of the FBI lab. They were greatly assisted in this because we'd run into to all walls. So the FBI lab was a great assistance to this. Once we got that sample back, then we were able to secure it and send it, and I believe you said that was December of 2019. And the first time I ever heard Anthony's name as a possible link to this case was in September of this year. And we still have a lot of work to do, but that's the first time after all those months that they came up with him being the possible. Because remember, in this case, there was no leads. Many unidentified people, are some leads that people can follow or at least have a working theory. Unfortunately, until September, there was no working theory of a possible identity. So we were completely blind in this. We have more questions. I understand we have questions from Facebook Live. Okay, Joan, would you be able to please hand me? Okay, the first question that I will answer is, what is the cause of death of Anthony? And at this time, the cause of death is due to multiple blunt force injuries. He had numerous fractures and suffered a traumatic death. Okay. Right now, with all the information we have gathered, we are believing that this is potentially a suicide because of all the information we've gained in the investigation over the last couple of weeks about what his intent was coming to Colorado. Okay. There's another question here that I'm going to go ahead and hand over to Missy or whoever wants to answer this from the DNA Doe Project, and it's the bottom one right here coming from Facebook Live.
Okay. And that question is, how do we volunteer for the DNA Doe Project? I believe we have a website, dnadoeproject.org, that has a link there. You can also follow us on Facebook. We post about all of our cases and our updates, and you can send a private message through our Facebook account. And those two ways would be the best way to apply and see if you're interested in helping us. We're always looking for volunteers.
Always upload.
Yes, and always remember, everyone, if you've done your DNA, and even if you're thinking about it and not sure, do your DNA, upload it to GEDmatch, upload it to FTDNA. You never know what family you can help. There's so many people out there that don't know what's happening to their family members. And it really does give people closure.
Even if you're adopted, we can help.
That's true. You know, there's another little side note to it that you might be able to help someone that's adopted. That's another little side note of our research. They're adopted. You can find, family members, other biological matches to you.
Thank you, Missy. Okay, so as we're doing this streaming, it's a little more difficult. We have a very small crowd here. Most people are on Facebook Live, so I'm going back and forth getting the questions that are being asked on Facebook Live. First question that I'm going to address now is, where was the individual found? Where was John found? John was found off of County Road 62, which is near Grant, Colorado. It's the Park County side of Winella Pass. He was off the road up in the wilderness in very steep and treacherous terrain, which I have set foot there since Anthony became a name that was possible identity. I went to the area and did a preliminary search. It is extremely rugged terrain. That's where he was recovered from in 1974. The other question that we're getting, I believe Kevin Vaughn says that, how do you get multiple blunt force trauma in a suicide? So what we're looking at right now is two potential scenarios. After all of our investigations, that's why we believe it to be a suicide, because the intent to end his life appeared to be there from all interviews that we've been able to do from multiple sides of family and friends. The multiple blunt force trauma we right now believe came from either an intentional jump or a fall while attempting to get up to the cliffs in this area. If he fell prior to jumping, he still was in the act of attempting to take his life. That's why we believe it to be a suicide. So that is how we have multiple blunt force trauma in a suicide attempt, a fall from that is very, very easy to fall from, but also at the top resembles kind of a plateau, if you will, which would match with the story of being taken by God, as we have heard by several interviews that we've done. Are there any other questions from Facebook Live coming in, or any other questions here in person?
I had one. From a DNA standpoint, and from just the crime solving or a mystery solving standpoint, how does this case differ from Aiden, from John Aiden?
Okay, so the question in the room from local media is that how does this case differ as far as the crime solving aspect to a current homicide case that was working here in the county? That case was also took a significant time to identify. That is a working homicide case, so I'm not going to speak in too much detail about that case as it's going to trial. However, what I can tell you is that the difference is that in the identification purpose is when I mentioned CODIS earlier, the database for criminal and missing persons DNA profiles, that was the use that we used on the other case. Unfortunately, there has to be an immediate relative or a direct sample in that database in order to obtain a hit to determine how the individual is identified. Unfortunately, in this case, that database was run. There were no immediate family members, and there was no direct DNA in the system in order to compare to. So therefore, it's much different in the fact that this technology, just a few years ago, would not have happened. I don't know the exact number of cases solved right now, but it's not astronomical. This is a pretty new and emerging science, and so this is something that wasn't available just 3 years ago, really, to be realistic. And so this is brand new technology, brand new use of what we're finding, and that's why we go to these meetings and share ideas so we can find out the latest technologies, and it has paid off in this case, so it's phenomenal.
Thank you.
We have another question from Facebook Live.
Okay.
Was it a hunch that made you reach out to the cousin that helped solve the case for DNA?
Well, let's go ahead and let DNA Doe go ahead and handle that question. Okay.
Once we had an identification or someone that we thought fit the Doe profile, we started looking for family members, trying to find someone close that could then identify. So it was basically a deal of looking through his family tree and seeing who maybe we could find and who might be willing to upload. So it takes research and to be able to find someone willing to do that and find someone that's still alive. He was born in 1929, and had no siblings, so that's why we went to a cousin. Thank you.
Any questions? Okay. Okay, I believe there's no more questions on Facebook Live. Is that correct at this time? All right. We will post this video and this press conference, and then any other questions here in person before we close today. Okay, seeing none, what I'd like to do is kind of give one last thanks. The DNA Doe project has been so fantastic in this. The fact that we were able to use such new technology and new science to get this accomplished means the world. I cannot tell you, those of us who work in forensics, our ultimate job is to speak for those who cannot speak for themselves. And it is a passion of mine, and it's a passion of everyone who works in this field. And so they're superheroes. They're the unsung superheroes behind the scenes that don't get flashy press coverage, but they do the job that needs to be done. And I can't even describe, because I've never been in a situation, the emotions that families must feel after so many years of having questions. And I believe that is something that we should take away from this, is that this does mean a lot. If you've had an open question in your life for decades, that this technology, this science, can solve those and give you answers. And even though it may be depressing in the fact that you've lost a loved one, but it's also rewarding in the fact that you now know what happened. And so I want to make sure that everyone acknowledges these folks, and I want to thank everyone involved. We've had such great cooperation from everyone in my office, from the FBI lab involved in this, from all the way down to the road and bridge people helping lot of effort over the years for this case, and to finally come to this conclusion and know who he is. He is not an unknown marker in the cemetery now. He has a name, he has a story, he has a family, which we always knew he did. But now we can share it with you, we can share it with the family, so he's not by himself anymore. And so I really take that away. It looks like, have we had a question pop up?
Couple more questions.
We have had a couple questions. We're going to address those really quick.
Age at the time of his death and any other unidentified cases that you are pursuing.
Okay, the question is, what was the age of Anthony at the time of his death? And the age was 45. Anthony was 45 years old at the time of his death, and Renee was 25 at the time of the disappearance. Okay, and then the other question, Don, could you repeat that?
Any other unidentified cases that you are pursuing?
Yes, we do have unidentified cases right now. We have 2 still left on our docket now that this one is solved, and we are working through DNA profiles with those cases as well, doing everything we can to bring their family answers. One we do have a lead on, and we're getting more comfortable with who it is. We hope to make that identification soon. But we have a case from just last year that is a completely anonymous mystery, unfortunately. We have no leads on this individual, just as we did John, who we are currently working in. We've been working on that case this year, trying, and we're going to be utilizing the DNA Doe Project most likely to assist with that as well. Any other questions that have come up?
What was Renee's last name? And do you believe that she's likely deceased as a result of the suicide pact?
So this, Renee's last name, her maiden name was Niles, Niles. Her married name was Armbrust. She was relatively newly married to Anthony, so we don't know which name she was still going under, but we have searched both for her. And as far as we can go, we only go off the interviews that we have about the suicide pact, and the general opinion of all people associated that she's most likely perished with him somewhere or nearby. But that is all the lead we have to go on right now, so I'm not going to speculate for sure one way or the other yet until we get more information. But right now, all the interviews are pointing towards the fact that she may have perished in the same area as John did. Okay?
And that's a picture of Renee.
And that is a picture of John and Renee fairly soon before the disappearance. Okay. And then we'll be posting this on Facebook as well, so you can clear a picture of that if you wish, and some of the pictures we'll be putting those on Facebook with the rest of the story today. I appreciate everyone for taking your time on Facebook Live to watch this. I know the COVID world we live in and the hybrid press conferences are a little different, but I really appreciate your time, and you can always reach out to us after the fact for any questions. Again, I want to thank everyone here with the DNA Doe Project and their incredible work on this case, and again to everyone in the audience. Thank you so much. You have a wonderful day.
Thank you.
I'm just trying to